is Danny Smith, aka Danny Odia. I want to share my story with you about Jesus Christ. Now he stepped into my life and saved me and changed me. At 3 years old, I was taken away from my family and put in the custody of some people that my uncle knew. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. There was 5 of us. We all got taken away. 2 brothers and a sister got put with family, so they went home relatively soon, sooner than me and my other brother that was in this home with me. Well, I ended up staying in this home. It wasn't really a foster home. It was more just some people that my uncle knew, where we could stay. We're really just taken away for child neglect. I think my mom was at the store and my dad, my mom was at work and my dad was at the store or something like that. Anyway, I was 3 years old. And basically, I ended up staying in this foster home until I was 11 years old, something like that. And, but, although I was in this foster home, or whatever you call it, I was beaten, I was set on fire, I was made to lick tea off the floor because my arms were too weak to carry a pitcher of tea. It's full to the brim on a gallon jug to the refrigerator without spilling it when I was 6 years old, I learned my ABCs by having a pile of shoes thrown at my head until I learned them. I was set on fire and thrown against walls. I was made to stand all night long holding cans of food out, like green beans, So anyway, it was bad. So I was also put in the Home of the Innocents and other foster homes throughout my life, between I was the age of 3 until I was 11. And then they finally found my real family, who I never saw during that time, never knew my real family. And I got to go back home and live with my real family and live with them. And, it wasn't a family that, was supportive, and no care was taken to see, about my psychological condition at the time. A child growing up in an abusive home with people he doesn't know all of a sudden at 3 years old until he's 11. None of my birthdays ever got celebrated. I didn't know when my birthday was until I was 11, and I heard a social worker actually telling then my new foster mom, which had been like the 4th one at the time, when my birthday was when I was 11. Although I was in separate group homes, I don't count those as foster homes, but I would always go back to the same lady and man, So anyway, long story short, it hurtled me down a path of, destruction basically, and I got into Satanism when I was 14, drinking the blood of rabbits and killing animals and doing just crazy stuff. And just horrible stuff. Stuff that I don't even want to tell you. It was so horrible, okay? And one day, I just felt so black inside, and I knew this wasn't me, and I knew I didn't like this. And I went outside and I prayed to God, and I said, Lord, I said, I know, I look around, I see the beauty of your world, I know there's a God, and I know you're out there somewhere, and I had no doubt that he would reveal himself to me in some fashion, and it's not as big as a scale as I'm about to tell you. I didn't know that. Of course, we don't know what God's going to do in our life, but from time to time, until we get to know his ways and know him, then we can kind of guess, but and experience those things. But so about the age of 19, surprising, I had been in and out of JCU, juvenile jails and boot camp 6 months and stuff like that. So when I was 19, I was with a friend in his backyard. He was living with his grandmother and off Cane Run Road. And I was in this friend's backyard, and we were just standing there talking. And it was about, I'd say, 4:30 or 5 in the afternoon. I had a motorcycle. I drove it over trying to sell me. I couldn't keep a job. I was 19 years old, I couldn't keep a job. I was so just irresponsible and unsteady, in my life. I was on in and out of counseling, on antidepressants. I'd been on almost every antidepressant you could think of, and none of it ever helped. None of it ever helped. I put myself through counseling. My family didn't put me through counseling. They were never supportive, and my family just my real family. Even after I got to know them, they just basically caused more problems in my life in a lot of ways, and that's fine. That's their deal, and so. I kind of went on my own way, So at 19 years old, I was in my friend's backyard, and as I was standing there talking to him, I started feeling like this weird feeling come over me, like almost like I couldn't breathe, and it was a typical day. I think it was pretty warm, probably about 70, 80 degrees. Wasn't too hot. I've never had any health problems before. Never passed out before, really. Never died. Anything, to that nature at all. So I started feeling like I couldn't breathe. I started feeling this pressure in me in the shape of almost like a V, but going up to my crown and the top of my head. I felt a pressure pushing up from my spirit into my skull, the top of my crown. And I started hearing a ringing noise. And this buzzing and ringing noise got louder and louder, and I started to become more afraid because I was becoming paralyzed. As I stood there, I couldn't even shake it off. I was bent over like this, trying to shake it off, and I was like I couldn't even move my neck. I couldn't even move my head. I was becoming paralyzed. And now that I'm older and I've studied it for 30 years, I know that that's one of the stages of leaving your body is you become paralyzed when you enter into the vibrational state. And so as I was afraid that I was going to pass out any moment and die, a peace came, and it took away my fear for a second, and then it left. And then a peace came again, and it took away my fear, and it left. And a peace came again, and it took away my fear. And then 3 times this peace came, and when it came, it was saying, it's okay. But it was foreign to me. I'm like, what is this? I don't know this voice. I don't know God. I don't know anything, And all I know is what I lived during my life. And so, but never anything really spiritual, And so, in the blink of an eye, I was in the clouds. I was in these humongous clouds, dark clouds. It was a dark area, gray area. I mean, just humongous clouds, I guess because I was up there in them. They seemed so big. And it happened so fast that I was in a new environment that it totally boggled my mind. I was like confused. I was like, hold on. I'm supposed to be at my friend's house. I drove my motorcycle over there. My boy is about a year old, So I started just remembering everything, about my life of where I should be at that point, and confused about where I am now. And so about in front of me, about 6 feet away, there was like an opening in the clouds, and someone stepped out from the right. It was a tall man, probably close to 6'8". He was pretty tall, and he was thin, and he didn't have his physical body. I know that now, but it evidently appeared to me to be someone who had lived before. But so he stepped out, and I guess he had his orders, from God. And so he stepped out, and when he did, he just stood there. But I was happy to see him, right? So I'm like, I thought I could ask him, where am I at? What's going on? And he never said anything to me. So, and that was about, 30 seconds went by. So behind this guy, in that passageway, about 60 feet away, comes a light. And as this light's coming up, it's soaring, and it's moving with such beauty and grace that, and the King James Bible version is when I read the King James version. In the Bible, it said that the Lord said that, told John the Baptist, when you see the Spirit of God descending like a dove, and that's kind of what it was like. He was just floating, just soaring like a beautiful bird, and all this light followed him. A trail of light followed him. In Ezekiel it says his train followed him. And the Lord really does wear his glory like a bride would wear her gown. It flows behind him. So this light come up, and the center of this light, it kind of looked like the sun in the sky coming up to me, but it didn't hurt my eyes. And lo and behold, did I know, this is the bright morning star, okay? I didn't realize that. My brain is frozen, okay? At this moment, this light is coming towards me. I'm frozen. My mind is frozen. My thoughts are frozen. I'm not thinking anything of my own will at this moment. It's like my brain is just focused on the beauty of the glory of God coming up, And I didn't even realize it was God coming up. And I'll explain that. Listen. So as this light comes up, it turns, and it comes past that guy that stepped out in the first place. He comes right next to me, and when he comes past me, I see that it's a man. There's a human form. It's a man, and beams of light are beaming out of his face, okay? And his body is actually overshadowed by this light, this glory shining out of his face, okay? There is no skin color that I can see. It's overshadowed, and when I say overshadowed, it's like, it was almost like a shadow, because the glory was so bright and brilliant. That's all I saw coming out of his head, his face. And he came up beside me, yet right behind me. And he ever took a magnet and slowly scooted it next to something, and you could feel that magnetic pull when it finally clicks together? Well, that's what the Lord did to my soul. He sucked me right into his presence, his glory. And when he did, I was just flooded full of love, peace, gentleness, kindness, happiness, everything good that the Lord is, And this is no lie. The ends of my mouth were up by my ears. That's how much joy I had in me. And the Lord told me he loved me, okay? A few seconds after that, all of a sudden, he allowed me to enter his rest. Yes, his rest is a little bit different than his joy, okay? It's a lot different. His rest exists entirely on its own, separate from the joy, okay? You get the joy and you get the rest, okay? If you make it to heaven with the Lord, So he allowed me to enter his rest. Oh, my Lord in heaven. This rest permitted every fiber of my soul. My soul was at rest, okay? True rest that comes from the Lord himself. So I turned because I wanted to see his face, So because it's so beautiful, right? And I'm like, who wouldn't, And I'm turning, and as I got about halfway turned, he gently, with his mind, turned me back around and ever so gently pushed me forward towards that guy that had stepped out in the first place, right? So I'm heading towards this guy. I'm still floating in love, in the Lord's love and his presence. And my spirit kind of hit the other guy's spirit. And when I did, I immediately saw my friend on earth looking down at me, standing over me, because I was back in my body, but the physical eyes in this body never shut. So I immediately saw my friend staring at me. He was standing over me. Well, he didn't know I was back. He steps over me. He goes to get the water hose. He's going to spray me with water. I'm laying on my back. If I get water sprayed in my face, it's going to go in my throat. It's going to choke me, right? So the Lord sent me back in the nick of time. But I wish I could have stayed, of course, So I stood up. My friend jumps back and he tries to shake the water hose on me. And this guy's was like an outlaw guy, okay? He's not the type of guy that calls the police, okay? And he said I was laying there. My body was laying there with my eyes wide open between 8 and 10 minutes as dead. And he was about to call an ambulance, he said. But like I said, he's not the type of guy that calls the police and stuff. So he was going to spray some water on me first. Anyway, the Lord saw that, sent me back, So some time went by, and I was living my life, and I knew there had to be more to this. And a while later, I heard the Lord speak to my heart, And he said, now is the day for you to accept my salvation. And when I say I heard the Lord speak to me, it wasn't with these ears, it was in my soul, my spirit. He spoke to my spirit, okay? When the Lord speaks to your spirit, you hear the Lord. You know who it is. There's no doubt about it, okay? And there's no delusions anywhere here, okay? Trust me. If you haven't heard from the Lord, then maybe you need to work on that in your life. You need to work on your faith. You need to quit living in doubt and unbelief, because that's just going to hold you back. People hold themselves back, okay, by what you choose to believe in. And believe it or not, it's real. Because, you know why? Because there are spiritual laws that have to be followed that God put in place, okay? And even God has to follow these rules himself, these laws. God has to follow these spiritual laws himself, okay? And so do we. And you just have to get in to obeying these spiritual laws, then you'll start seeing some success in your life when it comes to spiritual things, and especially with the Lord. You know, there's a spiritual law of faith that we have to have and exercise in Him. You know, we have to exercise our faith in Him. And that's a spiritual law God has put in place through Jesus Christ. And He came and He died on the cross. You know, and when I was baptized, the day He called me to get saved and reborn, you know, I had long hair down the middle of my back, you know. I had a tattoo on my arm that said, "Go to hell," okay? I had an upside-down cross on my hand, which you can see is barely fading away. It was so tiny. Homemade tattoos. You know, God didn't care about my tattoos, okay? You got some preachers out here saying, "Oh, God won't have nothing to do with you if you got tattoos." Lie. That is a lie. The Lord pulled me out of my body, appeared to me in all His glory, and look, I've got tattoos, okay? I didn't have this one, but I've got some since then. God doesn't care about your tattoos. Yeah, He may not want you to really, you know, do something to your body like that, but He's going to forgive you. It's not like, you know, it's going to keep you from heaven. It's not. It's not going to keep you from the love of God. There's nothing that can stop the love of God once He decides, you know, hey, this man wants to be with me. He's following my laws of faith. Let's enter him into our family. You know, and we were all predestined anyway. Everyone that's reborn is predestined to be in Christ and to be in heaven with Christ forever. Because let me tell you, one day you're going to die. And let me tell you what, when you pass away, you still live on, okay? You don't